"Mom." I whispered it so quietly that nobody else could hear. The reception hall buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft country music Michael and I had spent weeks choosing for our wedding playlist. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the vineyard, overlooking the rolling hills outside Napa Valley. But none of that mattered anymore, because I had just watched my sister slip something into my champagne, and my mother had seen it too. I remember every detail. Karen stood near the drink table in her pale blue dress, smiling as if she were the happiest guest in the room. Her hand moved quickly. A small packet. A brief glance around the room. Then she emptied it into my glass. I looked toward my mother immediately. Surely she would stop her. Surely she would say something. Instead, Mom met my eyes and smiled. Then she looked away. The room suddenly felt colder. I was 58 years old, standing at my own wedding reception, and for one terrible second I felt like I was 8 again. The unwanted daughter. The daughter nobody protected. I didn't confront them. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I quietly walked to the table while Karen was distracted greeting a guest. And I switched our glasses. Nobody noticed. Not Karen. Not Mom. Not even Michael. A few minutes later, Karen stood up and tapped her fork against a champagne glass. "Can I have everyone's attention?" The room quieted. She smiled directly at me. "This is going to be a day you'll never forget." Several guests laughed politely. I smiled back. Then I watched her take a long drink from the champagne she believed belonged to me. 30 minutes later, everything changed. Karen was standing near the dance floor when she suddenly swayed. Her smile vanished. She blinked several times, then she began talking. Far too much. The first strange comment slipped out while she was chatting with one of Michael's cousins. Then another. Then another. Soon heads began turning. People stopped dancing. Conversations faded. And for the first time in our lives, my sister was revealing exactly who she really was. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to explain how we got there. Because family wounds don't start in a single afternoon. They grow slowly, year after year. And ours had been growing for more than 50 years. My name is Linda Harper. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. My father worked maintenance at a manufacturing plant. Mom stayed home when Karen and I were young and later worked part-time at the local library. From the outside, we looked like a normal American family. Inside, things were different. Karen was older than me by 3 years, and from the beginning, she was the center of everything. I don't think Mom planned it that way. At least not at first. But Karen had a gift. She knew exactly how to make people feel sorry for her. If she forgot her homework, it wasn't her fault. If she got into trouble, someone else had caused it. If she failed at something, the world had been unfair. And somehow Mom always believed her. Meanwhile, I became the dependable one. The responsible one. The daughter who could handle disappointment. When Karen wanted piano lessons, Mom found the money. When I wanted art classes, we couldn't afford them. When Karen wrecked Dad's car at 17, everyone comforted her. When I got a speeding ticket at 19, I heard about it for 6 months. Small things. Hundreds of small things. The kind that seem insignificant by themselves. But together, they shape a life. Dad noticed it sometimes. I know he did. He'd squeeze my shoulder when Mom wasn't looking. Or leave a $20 bill on my dresser with a note saying, "Proud of you, kiddo." Those moments mattered. But they never changed the bigger picture. Karen remained the favorite. And everyone knew it. By my 30s, I'd mostly accepted it. I married my first husband, Robert. We built a good life together in Ohio. Nothing fancy. A modest home. 2 decent jobs. Weekend barbecues. Church on Sundays. The kind of life many Americans understand. The kind of life built quietly. Then cancer took Robert. Fast. Too fast. One year we were planning a trip to Maine. The next year I was standing beside his hospital bed saying goodbye. I was 52 when I became a widow. And for a long time I thought that chapter of my life was over. I stopped dating. Stopped hoping. Stopped imagining a future that looked different from my present. Then Michael appeared. It happened completely by accident. I met him at a charity fundraiser for retired firefighters. A mutual friend introduced us. Michael was 61. Kind eyes. Steady voice. No games. No drama. Just a good man. The kind of man who listened when you spoke. The kind who remembered small details. The kind who showed up. At first we were friends. Then dinner companions. Then something more. 3 years later he proposed while we were walking near the Sacramento River at sunset. I cried before he even finished asking. For the first time since losing Robert, I felt hopeful again. I felt chosen. Loved. Safe. Most people celebrated with us. Karen didn't. The moment she learned about the engagement, something changed. The comments started immediately. "Oh, aren't you moving a little fast?" We'd been dating 3 years. Then, white wedding dress at our age. And later, "You really think people want to sit through another wedding?" Mom laughed at those comments. Not because they were funny, because Karen had said them. The old pattern never changed. Still, I ignored it. I was too happy, too focused on building a future. Looking back now, I should have paid closer attention. Because during the weeks before the wedding, Karen wasn't just jealous. She was planning something. And on that beautiful afternoon in Napa Valley, as I watched guests gather around my increasingly unstable sister, I realized I was finally about to discover exactly how far she was willing to go. As guests slowly turned their attention toward Karen that afternoon, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of me was nervous. Part of me was angry. But mostly, I felt tired. Tired of 50 years of the same story. Tired of pretending things were normal. Tired of protecting people who had never protected me. Karen stood near one of the reception tables, talking louder than usual. A few guests exchanged confused looks. Michael leaned closer. "Linda," he whispered, "is your sister, okay?" I looked at him. For a moment I considered telling him everything. But I wasn't ready yet. "I'm not sure," I said quietly. He nodded, though I could tell he sensed something was wrong. Michael always noticed things. That was one of the reasons I loved him. Unlike most people in my family, he paid attention. The truth was, Karen's behavior hadn't surprised me at all. Because for weeks I'd been watching her unravel. The engagement announcement had been the beginning. The wedding planning made everything worse. Every dress fitting, every family dinner, every conversation somehow became about Karen. If I mentioned the venue, Karen criticized it. If I discussed flowers, Karen found fault. If I talked about our honeymoon plans, Karen suddenly had a dramatic personal crisis that shifted everyone's attention back to her. And as always, Mom supported her. One afternoon about 4 months before the wedding, we were having lunch at a small diner near Mom's house in Ohio. Karen was complaining about money. Again. "She doesn't understand how lucky she is," Karen told Mom while pointing at me with her fork. I nearly laughed. Lucky? I had worked since I was 16. Paid my own way through community college. Helped care for Dad during his final illness. Supported Robert through years of medical treatments. Spent nights crying alone after becoming a widow. But somehow I was lucky. Mom nodded sympathetically. "You've had a harder life than Linda," she told Karen. I remember staring at my coffee cup. Not because I believed it. Because I was tired of arguing. Karen smiled triumphantly. The conversation moved on. Just another day. Just another example. By then I had learned something important. Favoritism doesn't only hurt the overlooked child. It damages the favorite child, too. Karen had spent decades believing the world owed her special treatment. And life kept proving otherwise. Her first marriage ended after 6 years. Her second marriage survived, but barely. She struggled to keep jobs. Struggled to maintain friendships. Struggled to accept responsibility for anything. Whenever something went wrong, someone else became the villain. A boss. A neighbor. An ex-husband. A friend. Or me. Especially me. As the wedding approached, her resentment became harder to hide. One evening she came to my house while Michael was working on some landscaping in the backyard. She stood in my kitchen looking around. "You know," she said casually, "some women don't know when to stop chasing attention." I knew exactly what she meant. "Excuse me," she shrugged. "A big wedding at nearly 60 seems a little desperate." I should have thrown her out. Instead, I took a breath. "Karen, why does this bother you so much?" For a moment, something flashed across her face. Jealousy. Raw and unmistakable. Then it disappeared. "I'm just being honest." Number. She wasn't. She was being cruel. There was a difference. The worst part was that Mom always defended her. If Karen insulted someone, Mom called it honesty. If Karen lied, Mom called it misunderstanding. If Karen hurt someone, Mom called it stress. The excuses never ended. Then came the moment that changed everything. It happened 1 week before the wedding. Pure accident. Nothing more. I had stopped by Mom's house to drop off some invitation updates. Mom wasn't home. Her car was gone. I assumed nobody was there. As I approached the front door, I heard voices coming through an open kitchen window. Karen's voice. And another woman. An old friend named Denise. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. At first. Then I heard my name. I froze. "She's acting like she's some kind of princess," Karen said. Both women laughed. "It's one day," Denise replied. "Exactly," Karen said, "which is why it'll be hilarious." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "What are you planning?" Denise asked. Karen lowered her voice slightly. I stepped closer without even realizing it. Then I heard every word. "Nothing dangerous," Karen said. "Just enough to ruin her perfect little day." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" Karen laughed. "Let's just say she won't be walking down that aisle looking so graceful." The women laughed again. Then Karen continued, "I found something that'll make her anxious, emotional, confused, and completely miserable." I felt cold. Completely cold. "Karen," Denise said uncertainly. "Relax, it's harmless, embarrassing but harmless." I couldn't breathe. My own sister was planning to sabotage my wedding. Not because I had hurt her. Not because I'd done anything wrong. Because she couldn't stand seeing me happy. I stood there for several seconds after the conversation ended. My hands were shaking. My chest hurt. Part of me wanted to storm inside. Confront her. Expose everything. But another part of me stopped. For the first time in my life, I asked myself a simple question. What would happen if Karen faced the consequences of her own actions? Not revenge. Not cruelty. Just consequences. That evening I told no one. Not Michael. Not my friends. Not my cousins. No one. I simply watched. And waited. Over the next few days, Karen acted completely normal. She attended wedding events. Smiled for photographs. Helped decorate tables. Pretended to be a supportive sister. The performance was impressive. Almost convincing. But now I knew the truth. And once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. The morning of the wedding arrived. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Everything I had hoped for. Michael looked handsome. The weather was perfect. The guests were happy. For a few hours, I allowed myself to believe Karen might have changed her mind. Maybe she had abandoned the plan. Maybe she had realized how cruel it was. Maybe. Then I saw her walking toward the reception drink table. And moments later, I watched her empty a small packet into my champagne glass. The same packet she had bragged about 1 week earlier. The same packet my mother silently approved. And that's when I made the decision that would change our family forever. I switched the glasses. Then I sat down and waited. After I switched the glasses, I returned to my seat beside Michael and forced myself to smile. That was harder than it sounds. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Across the room, Karen was laughing with a group of relatives. Mom sat nearby completely relaxed. Neither of them had noticed anything. The reception continued. Dinner was served. Guests shared stories. Someone started a conversation about retirement travel. A cousin showed pictures of her grandchildren. For a little while, everything felt normal. But beneath the surface, I was waiting. Not because I wanted Karen to suffer. Despite everything, she was still my sister. But I was tired of protecting her from herself. And for once, I wanted the truth to speak louder than excuses. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. "You okay?" I looked at him. His concern almost broke me. "Yes," I said softly. "Just emotional." That wasn't entirely a lie. I was emotional. I was getting married. I was remembering Robert. I was thinking about my father. And I was watching decades of family dysfunction slowly approach a breaking point. A few minutes later, Karen stood up for her official toast. The room quieted. She tapped her spoon against her glass. "Can I steal everyone's attention for a moment?" Guests smiled. Several people lifted their own glasses. Karen looked beautiful on the outside. Confident. Composed. Charming. The version of herself she always presented to the world. She raised her champagne. "This is going to be a day you'll never forget." Laughter drifted through the room. I smiled politely. Karen continued. "To my little sister Linda." She paused dramatically. "Who somehow managed to convince a wonderful man to marry her." A few guests chuckled. The joke felt harmless enough. But I noticed Michael's expression tighten slightly. He heard the edge underneath it. Karen always hid insults inside humor. It was one of her favorite tricks. "Seriously," she continued, "Linda has always been determined." More laughter. "Sometimes stubborn." A few nods. "Sometimes impossible." More laughter. Mom laughed the loudest. Karen took another long sip of champagne. Then another. At first, nothing seemed unusual. She finished the toast. Guests applauded. Music resumed. People returned to eating and talking. For about 20 minutes, everything remained perfectly normal. Then the cracks began to appear. Karen became unusually talkative. She moved from table to table, inserting herself into conversations. At first, nobody thought much of it. Karen always enjoyed attention. But gradually, people started noticing something strange. She wasn't filtering herself anymore. The first awkward moment happened near the table where several of Michael's relatives were sitting. I overheard her saying, "Well, Linda always gets sympathy. That's her real talent." The table fell silent. Someone laughed nervously. Karen kept talking. Honestly, she's been doing it for years. An uncomfortable glance passed between two guests. Karen didn't seem to notice. She wandered away. 10 minutes later, she was speaking with one of my cousins. Mom always said Linda was too sensitive. My cousin frowned. I don't think your mom ever said that. Karen laughed. Oh, she absolutely did, all the time. Nearby, Mom's face suddenly tightened. The conversation shifted. But Karen kept talking. And talking. And talking. The medication or whatever she had intended for me seemed to be affecting her judgment more with each passing minute. The real turning point came near the dance floor. About 50 guests were gathered nearby. Karen was telling a story. At least she thought she was. Then she said something she couldn't take back. You have no idea how hard it is being compared to Linda all the time. The room became noticeably quieter. Compared to me, several people exchanged confused looks. That wasn't the family story they knew. Karen continued. She always got attention after Robert died. Nobody responded. She always got praise for being responsible. Silence. She always got treated like some kind of saint. The room had become completely still. I watched Mom stand up from her chair. Karen, she said sharply, maybe you should sit down. Karen ignored her. For the first time all evening, she seemed unable to control herself. Years of resentment were pouring out. Do you know how many times Mom had to help me because Linda made everyone feel sorry for her? A stunned silence followed. Then my cousin Rachel spoke. Karen, what are you talking about? Karen laughed. A strange, bitter laugh. Come on, everybody knows Mom always had to protect me. The moment the words left her mouth, she seemed to realize something was wrong. But it was too late. Several relatives stared at Mom. Others stared at Karen. Old memories suddenly started connecting. Things people had noticed but never discussed. Things they had ignored. Things they had excused. Mom stepped forward. Karen. Her voice was firm now. That's enough. But Karen wasn't finished. Not even close. She pointed directly toward me. Do you know why this wedding bothered me? The room froze. My stomach tightened. Even Michael stopped breathing beside me. Karen shook her head. Because she always wins. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Karen continued. She gets the good husband. She pointed at Michael. She gets everyone's sympathy. She pointed at me. She gets all the attention. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The sentence that exposed decades of lies. I was supposed to teach her a lesson today. The room erupted into whispers. Mom's face turned white. Karen's own husband looked horrified. What lesson, someone asked. Karen blinked. For a moment she seemed confused. Then she answered. The drink. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the music seemed to disappear. The drink, Rachel repeated. Karen nodded. Still talking. Still unable to stop. I told Denise it would ruin the whole wedding. A collective gasp swept through the room. My hands started shaking. Not because I was surprised. I already knew. But because everyone else was hearing it too. Finally. The truth was no longer trapped inside me. Karen looked around the room. For the first time, she seemed to realize something was terribly wrong. Faces stared back at her. Shocked. Disappointed. Disgusted. Her confidence vanished. Mom reached her side. Karen, she whispered urgently. Stop talking. But Karen wasn't the only one losing control anymore. Because years of family secrets had just been dragged into the light. And the people hearing them weren't willing to stay silent. For a few seconds after Karen's confession, nobody spoke. The reception hall felt frozen in time. 50 years of family history hung in the air between us. Karen stood near the dance floor, blinking rapidly as if she were waking up from a dream. Mom looked terrified. Not worried. Not embarrassed. Terrified. Because for the first time in her life, she couldn't control the story. The truth was already out, and everyone had heard it. What drink? The question came from Michael's nephew. Karen stared at him, then at the guests, then at me. Suddenly, realization began spreading across her face. Her eyes widened. The confidence disappeared. What did I say? She whispered. Nobody answered. You said enough, Rachel replied quietly. Karen turned toward Mom. Mom looked away. That alone told everyone more than words ever could. I slowly stood from my chair. The room immediately became silent again. Every eye followed me. For years I had imagined moments like this. Moments when people would finally see what had been happening. Moments when someone would believe me. But standing there, I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Deeply sad. Because the people who had hurt me most weren't strangers. They were family. Linda Karen said weakly. What happened? I took a slow breath. Then I answered honestly, "You put something in my drink." A murmur swept across the room. Karen immediately looked toward Mom. Not me. Mom. Just like she always had. Mom finally spoke. "Karen," her voice cracked, "you need to stop talking." That was the wrong thing to say. Several guests exchanged frustrated looks. My cousin Rachel stood up. "Number." Everyone turned toward her. "No, actually, maybe it's time we all start talking." The room became very still. Rachel looked directly at Mom. "You've protected Karen her entire life." Mom opened her mouth. Rachel didn't let her interrupt. "You protected her when she lied. You protected her when she cheated people. You protected her when she blamed everyone else for her mistakes." Several relatives slowly nodded. A few looked uncomfortable, but nobody disagreed. Because they all knew it was true. One by one people started speaking. Not angrily, not dramatically, just honestly. My cousin Ben spoke first. "Karen borrowed money from me 15 years ago and never paid it back." Another relative nodded. "She did the same thing to me." An aunt quietly added, "She blamed Linda for something Karen did when they were teenagers." Another voice came from across the room. "I remember that." Then another. "And I remember when Linda took care of her father every day while Karen rarely visited." The comments kept coming. Not because people wanted revenge. Because people had spent years staying quiet. And now the silence had finally broken. Mom looked overwhelmed. I had never seen her like that. For most of my life she always had an explanation. A defense. An excuse? This time she had nothing. Her eyes moved around the room. Listening. Really listening. Maybe for the first time. Then something happened that surprised me. My daughter Emily stood up. Emily was 33. Smart. Calm. Nothing like the family drama she grew up around. She looked directly at Mom. "Grandma," she said gently, "you always told me Aunt Karen just needed more understanding." Mom lowered her eyes. Emily continued, "Did you ever stop to think Mom needed some too?" The question landed like a stone. Mom's shoulders sagged. For the first time that day I saw genuine regret. Not embarrassment. Regret. Across the room, Karen's husband Steve slowly stood up. He looked exhausted. Not angry. Just tired. Very tired. "How many years?" he asked quietly. Karen stared at him. "What? How many years have you been doing this?" She couldn't answer. Steve nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd suspected for a long time. Then he picked up his jacket. "I think I'm going home." Karen's face crumbled. "Steve, wait." But he kept walking. The door closed behind him. The sound echoed through the room. For the first time, Karen looked truly afraid. Not because of me, not because of the guests, because the consequences were finally becoming real. I watched her standing there, broken, humiliated, alone. And suddenly I had a choice. I could destroy her. Publicly. Completely. Nobody would stop me. Nobody would blame me. After everything she'd done, most people would probably cheer. Instead, I walked toward her. The room watched. Karen looked up. Tears were forming in her eyes. "Why?" I asked quietly. Not angrily. Honestly. "Why did you hate me so much?" For a moment she looked like a little girl. Not the manipulative woman everyone knew. Just a sad little girl. "I didn't hate you," she whispered. I almost laughed. But then she continued. "I hated how people loved you." The room went silent again. Karen wiped her eyes. "You always survived everything." She pointed toward me. "Dad loved you. Robert loved you. Your kids love you. Michael loves you." Her voice broke. "And no matter what happened, people respected you." The confession sounded different from the earlier ones. This one wasn't bitterness. It was pain. Years of pain. Misguided. Unhealthy. But real. I finally understood something. Karen had spent her entire life competing in a contest that only existed inside her own mind. And Mom had unknowingly fed it for decades. I looked toward Michael. He gave me a small nod. The kind that reminded me exactly why I married him. Then I turned back to Karen. "You need help," I said quietly. She nodded. For once there was no argument. No excuse, no manipulation. Just a simple nod. The reception never fully recovered after that. But strangely, neither did it collapse. Guests stayed. People talked. People cried. People hugged. Truth has a strange way of clearing the air, even when it hurts. Several weeks later, long after the wedding ended, I received a phone call I never expected. Karen wanted to meet. Alone. And according to her voice message, there was something she needed to say. Something she had never said to me before. 3 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was sitting on the back patio with a cup of coffee watching Michael trim a rose bush we had planted together after returning from our honeymoon. The caller ID said, "Karen." For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. Old habits die hard. So do old wounds. But eventually I answered, "Hello." There was a long pause. Then I heard something I wasn't sure I'd ever hear from my sister. "Linda, would you meet me?" Her voice sounded different. Smaller. Fragile. I didn't answer immediately. "Please," she added. So 2 days later I drove to a small diner outside Columbus. The same diner where we'd had countless family lunches over the years. The same diner where Mom had defended Karen more times than I could count. The same diner where I'd learned to stay quiet. When I walked inside, Karen was already there. She looked older. Not physically. Emotionally. The confidence she had worn like armor for decades seemed gone. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then she stood. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from her. The waitress poured coffee. Neither of us touched it. Finally, Karen looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to do this." I waited. She swallowed hard. Then the words came. "I'm sorry." Simple. Direct. No excuses. No explanations. Just 2 words. I stared at her. Not because I didn't believe her. Because I'd waited almost 60 years to hear them. Tears filled her eyes. "I've been jealous of you my whole life." There it was. The truth. Raw and ugly. I know it sounds ridiculous. It does, I said gently. To my surprise, Karen laughed. A sad little laugh. Yeah, it does. For the next hour she talked. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in her life, she admitted she had spent decades comparing herself to me. Every success, every relationship, every compliment, every achievement, everything became a competition. The strange part was that I never knew we were competing. I kept waiting for people to love me the way they loved you. I shook my head. People loved you. She nodded. I know that now. Then she looked out the window. But I didn't believe it back then. Her voice cracked. I thought attention was love. That sentence stayed with me. Because it explained so much. Karen had spent her life chasing attention. Not love. Attention. And they're not the same thing. Not even close. Toward the end of our conversation, she told me she had started seeing a therapist. Apparently, Steve had given her an ultimatum. Get help. Or lose the marriage. For once, Karen chose accountability. I respected that. Before we left, she looked at me. Do you think you can ever forgive me? I thought carefully before answering. Because forgiveness isn't something you owe someone. It's something you choose. Eventually, I nodded. Yes. Her eyes widened. Really? Yes. Why? I smiled. Because I don't want to carry this anymore. And that was the truth. Forgiveness didn't erase the damage. It didn't rewrite history. It didn't magically heal every wound. But it freed me from carrying those wounds forever. A month later, something even more surprising happened. Mom called and asked to see me alone. When I arrived at her house, she looked nervous. I couldn't remember ever seeing my mother nervous around me. We sat at the kitchen table where so many difficult conversations had happened over the years. For a while, she simply stared into her tea. Then she began to cry. I failed both of you. The words hit me harder than I expected. Mom wiped her eyes. I thought I was helping Karen. She shook her head. But I wasn't helping her. No, I said softly. You weren't. For once, she didn't argue. She nodded. I made excuses. Yes. I protected her. Yes. I ignored what it was doing to you. I felt tears forming in my own eyes. Yes. The honesty hurt, but it also healed. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. I am so sorry, Linda. That moment didn't erase decades of favoritism. Nothing could. But it mattered. Because accountability matters. Truth matters. And sometimes healing begins with finally naming the damage. Over the following months, things slowly changed. Not perfectly. Not dramatically. Just honestly. Karen continued therapy. Steve stayed. Their marriage remained difficult but stronger than before. Mom worked hard to rebuild relationships she had neglected. Family gatherings became less performative. More genuine. For the first time in years, people said what they actually meant. And me, I focused on the life Michael and I were building together. The life I had almost allowed family dysfunction to overshadow. One evening nearly a year after the wedding, Michael and I sat on our porch watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and gold. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass, and for the first time in a very long time I felt peaceful. Not because everything was perfect. Because it wasn't. Families are messy. People are flawed. Healing is rarely neat. But truth had finally entered places where silence once lived. And that changed everything. If there's one lesson I've learned from my story, it's this. Favoritism doesn't only hurt the child who is overlooked, it also damages the child who is favored. One learns they are never enough. The other learns they never have to be accountable. And eventually both pay the price. Revenge may expose the truth, but only honesty can heal it. Love requires fairness. Families require courage. And silence, no matter how comfortable it feels, is never the same thing as peace. If this story touched you or reminded you of someone in your own life, I'd love for you to share your thoughts. And if you enjoy stories about family resilience, second chances, and the lessons life teaches us far too late, consider following along for more journeys like this one. Take care of yourselves, take care of the people you love, and never wait 50 years to tell the truth. The end.